Love. Love is the best thing we do. And when life gives you a second chance, it has to be like Rose and Bent. Welcome to Memories in a Pod, Rose and Bent. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for inviting us.
Your love story is something that touches my heart. And now I know that we have to preserve this because when life gives you a second chance at love, you've both taken that. And you guys make me believe that love is so real, it is so pure. And when it's like you, that's what you want. So let's start with, if you could preserve a core memory from your journey, we'll start with either of y'all. What would it be?
Well, what has happened is that we haven't sat still. And neither Rose nor I are the sitting still type. It's a bit of a funny record, but you know what? We have never watched a television program together. We watch movies, but we don't sit still long enough. So we have traveled the world. Since we met now 20 years ago, we have been to 27 countries together.
Oh my God.
And the joy that I think back to now is I can just arbitrarily pick a picture out of my past and I can weave the story around that particular moment. And to be two good friends, lover, often, and travel the world together, it's fantastic because four eyes see so much more than two. So the biggest memories I have is of Rose and I doing things away from here, or for that matter, even packing. That's an art too, and we're good at it.
I taught him an awful lot. He talks about packing. He learned how to really pack tight, like backpacking. Bengt, that's interesting. That's your memory, and I certainly agree. And when you start talking about the traveling that we've done, and just being together, and I think Bengt has always said that it's better sharing with someone than to ever travel on your own. And I think he's right about that. But I mean, you asked the question, what would be, and I have it here because you've actually got questions, but what would one core memory be from your journey? And I went a different route, and I tried to think of what would my one core memory be. And that one would be getting engaged. And I say that it was spectacular the way we got engaged, but it was the buildup. I mean, we dated for a year and a half. We lived together for a year. And I used to say to everybody, it was fun living in sin, because people would say, oh, there's your husband. Or I say, oh, no, he's not my husband. We live in sin. Or he's my lover, or something equally as stupid.
Or he's my boy toy.
Something silly. And everybody would laugh. So it was always kind of a topic of conversation. It was always fun being together. But when we were both in our 60s when we met. We both had a spouse that had died with cancer. We both had gone through the grief and the horrible feelings of looking after somebody that was that sick. And so here we were. When I met him, and I was dating, we met on the internet. And when we met, you wonder, like, what do you want in life? And I don't think that we either knew exactly. For me, I was looking for a companion. I wanted someone to go to a movie with, or out for dinner, or something exciting, or maybe even take, a weekend going to Las Vegas or New York City or something like that. But I don't think I ever had wanted to get married.
Her to Las Vegas.
You never took me to. You took me many countries, but you never did that. You were never that kind of companion with me. But it was interesting with where we were, and as I had mentioned, because we both had cared for someone with cancer. You're saying to yourself, I don't ever want to do that again. I never want to go through that grief and that pain again.
Yeah.
And so you question, what is the relationship? So here we were finally living together, which was very nice. I was still working, he was retired. And everything to me looked to be wonderful, but to him, he wanted to get married. Oh, he wanted to get married, like why? I would say to him, why do you want to get married? And, the end of the conversation would be that he really thought that living together, he and I, that it was giving the wrong thoughts to our grandchildren, the wrong message to our grandchildren. And we kind of discussed it. The other thing is he felt he had never lived in sin like this before, and that God was going to strike him down with lightning every time he went to the door and went outside, and he was going to be stricken down with lightning. And, those were his reasons, I think, as well as perhaps a commitment that he never talked about it, but it was these two things that he wanted to get married. And, he would say to me, well, if I could buy you a ring, what size would it be? Forget it, I'm not giving you, we're not getting a ring. And, it kind of went on, and there was never any really commitment that we were going to get engaged or that we were going to get married. So we had a trip planned to go to Paris, and I knew it. I knew he was going to ask me. And, like for weeks I was thinking, what am I going to say? Because truly, I didn't know. I really, there was the advantage, but at over 60 years old, what kind of advantage, I questioned. So it was an up and down whether it was worthwhile, and with the kids and all the other, complications that would come up. But we flew on to Paris, and I knew it. He never said anything about getting engaged. And we got off the airplane, and it had been a long flight. I had taken a sleeping pill because I don't sleep well on the airplane. And because I didn't sleep well, I decided I'd take a second one. By the time I got off the airplane, I was like in a daze because I didn't sleep there. Anyways, we went, we walked, this is the first day the first time off the airplane, and we ended up going to the Eiffel Tower. And I'm thinking, as we're walking up all these steps, what am I going to do? What am I going to say? And
there was a long lineup for the escalators, but it was cheaper, only €2 to walk up.
So we, as we're going up, it's hot, I'm tired, I had to pee. We stop at the landing, and I go to use the washroom, and I come back, and there he has a bottle of water and a donut. And he's sitting at this little table. We're the only ones there. It's pouring rain, everything's going on, and I'm thinking, oh, that's awfully sweet of him. Like now I'm feeling better, I'm not hungry, I'm not thirsty, I'm okay. And then we continue going up to the landing.
762 steps. Took over an hour.
We get up there, and again, I'm thinking, I still don't know really what I'm going to say. And then we go out, and there's some younger people in the rain also, and the wind's blowing, and the rain's coming down, and he gets down on his knee.
Oh my God.
He says, Rose, will you marry me? And then he pulls out of his pocket this little yellow bag, and he said, I went to the dollar store and I told the lady I didn't know what size your ring was. And she let me have 2 for $1, different sizes. And he pulls out these 2 rings, and there are these rings on his hand. And he says, Rose, will you marry me?
Oh my God, that is so cute.
You know what? I said yes. Okay, that's the answer. But I want everyone to know that it wasn't an easy decision. It was a decision of, sure, the 2 rings, the donut, all the rest, those were all nice things. But it was also the desire to have a commitment. And I think the end result was how glad I was that we got married. Why? Because suddenly there is that commitment. And before that, I mean, don't forget, now we're older, okay? We're not as glamorous, I'm going to use that word, or, you know, we're not the way we were when we were 20. We're older. We're starting to get wrinkles. You know, we can't see as well. You know, we're not as athletic as we used to be, and you kind of wonder, even though we're living together, like, is this for real? And all of a sudden, when you were committed, and we ended up getting married, that commitment says an awful lot. And that commitment also told our children, hey guys, it ain't gonna go away. And even though they knew we were living together, I think all of them were, it's okay. You know, we whether we like it or not, we have to accept it. That was kind of the attitude that they all had to take. But then, of course, over the years, we've all become family. So if there was one thing that I felt about our whole dating was really that day going up the Eiffel Tower and saying yes when I really wasn't sure that was going to be it. And I'm delighted.
Yeah.
It should have been.
Clearly, Bent is the most romantic, the most romantic one in this relationship.
By far.
Well, let me analyze romance now. It was windy, it was rainy. Is that romantic? I've heard about romance.
It is so okay. So it is romantic when you plan this entire thing, and it's a woman's dream to be proposed to at the Eiffel Tower. And it's also the way you did it with 2 rings. It wasn't one. It is about these small gestures and the fact that you remember.
No, and you're right, but I want to tell you something else, because you talk about being romantic, and this is funny. We had 2 dates. We met on the internet. We had 2 dates, and after the second date, he was going off to, where'd you go? Dallas, Texas.
First, I'd like to tell about the first date.
No, wait a minute. No. Wait, you're interrupting my story.
Okay, I'm not.
You can tell whatever you want after I finish my story. And the second date, he went off to Texas. Now, to be honest with you, I had been on the internet. I had been widowed for 7 years, and I had gone out with you. You had said you went out with 51. I can tell you I went out with 99 frogs.
Wow.
For a cup of coffee and blew on it to make sure it would be cool enough so I could leave quickly. But, and at that time, he was very pushy when we met. He was pushy enough that every time we met, he would say, and when can I see you again? It's not like I'll phone you or whatever. He wouldn't go away until I said, and when can we get together again? Now, if it hadn't been like that, I may not have answered the phone when he called again. But what did happen when he was in Texas, he sent me flowers to the office of all things. And on it, he wrote, from one romantic to another. Now, I had to write back and say thank you. That was the only nice thing that you can do. And that was the fact that he was romantic made the difference.
Yeah.
Then we continued to see each other.
Yeah, because one partner has to be that romantic one, and the other one has to be a little more practical or not so romantic. And I know Bent is, every time I speak to him also, even if I meet him on the street, he's like this romantic person. And I'm like, how do you have it all the time? Like when he looks at you, the way he looks at you, you can feel that, the love is so real. It's not just all talks. It's not just about being together. But even after being together for 20 years and having that love alive, that's what makes it so special. Bent, you were saying something before Rose started speaking.
Oh, well, we met on the internet, and since I had been widowed the year before, and being a project manager, engineer by profession, so I set out a project. I created a project to meet the perfect woman. So I had certain points that had to be met. And then I've on the internet, you can read and compare notes. So I had already been to 17 coffee dates. And as Rose said, some of them you blew on the coffee so you get out a little quicker. And I was actually in the process of disengaging myself. Time's over, time's up. I tried, I failed. One more email came in, and I read it. And there was one line, because I had specifically said, I don't like to drive very far. I lived in Kitchener, so 50 kilometer, and you still have a lot of women. So there was one, and the line said, well, I realize I'm far away, but I have car, can travel. So I said, okay. And there's more to this. So I read it a couple of times and said, okay, I'll contact her. So I did. Now we were far away, like 120 kilometers. So as it happened, we met halfway at the restaurant. Because if I drive that far, I'm not going to have a coffee to blow on to drive home again. The car isn't even cold in the parking lot. So now, being that we had a fair distance to go, I didn't know about the timing, so I arrived early, and I had a book. But I sat there, and I wanted to read my book, and look up and read book. That doesn't work. But I also happened to have, what did I have?
Plastic red rose through his teeth.
So now I knew that if Rose came, she would recognize the rose. So now I could read my book, and I did read my book until Rose came.
Wow.
That was the first meeting.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, that take us back to the very beginning of how it started. And how did you first feel? You didn't mention that you met online and, there was an email. But Rose, what's your side of the story? We know Ben's side of the story.
Okay, I'm trying to think. I actually wrote a couple of notes because you did give us the questions in advance. And I thought a lot about that. First of all, I found him very pleasant and very accommodating. And I felt, first of all, I could be very controlling. I'm wondering about this. He was too nice. He was quite amazing because he knew so much. And I thought to myself, this is the smartest man I've ever met. And I really mean that. And I still say that. He's not quite as sharp as he used to be because we're aging. But I will tell you, he's the smartest man that I've ever met. And so, he was just so nice about everything. And I guess where was kind of a turning point? We went to Sweden. We were just dating, but he said, listen, do you want to go? I'm going to Sweden and I'd like you to come. And I'm thinking, oh, sure, I'd love to go to Sweden. Just because it would be interesting. But we get there, and I still remember this to the day. You get off the airplane and you go out and you're looking. I don't think I had been to Europe before. This was the first time. But particularly you go to Sweden and everybody's walking around with blonde hair and blue eyes. It's so different from, being here in Toronto. But one of the first things he said to me getting off the airplane, he pointed out to the ladies' washroom and he said, do you want to use the washroom? Well, nobody would think of telling another partner, no, do you want to use the washroom? That's a very, not intimate, but there's something feeling about it that you're saying, I want to make sure that you're feeling okay. Yeah. If you need to use it, this is the time to use it. So that's a strange thing to tell you, but that I will never forget that. I felt that it was so odd that a man would say to a woman, there's a ladies' washroom, would you like to use it? And it just said to me something very special about who he was.
Yeah, that's really thoughtful. Because he was taking care of the minute things. It was not the bigger things. Because everyone takes care of the bigger.
Right. It was just unusual. And I thought it was very, very special. And it told me a lot about who he was. And I'm thinking, oh, here's somebody that will look after me. That's really what you think.
Yeah. Interesting.
So on the same score, so we met this first time, and we had a glass of wine, and there was a candle on the table. And then we talked about what we wanted to do. You can call it the bucket list if you wish. And we said a few things each. And then I said, well, pretty well number one on my bucket list is to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And the echo of my voice had no sooner subsided in the room, but Rose looked me into the eyes and she said, I just did that, but I will do it again with you. That was the moment when I just thought and knew and realized that this woman is special. So to prove that, because now in my own mind, Rose has bragged about how good she is. Mount Kilimanjaro is no mean feat. Yeah. It's 5,000 meters and you're up at the level where you can almost not breathe. So I didn't want to challenge her specifically, but I did. So a week later we rented motorcycles.
Oh, God.
And me being an ex-motorcycle dispatcher in the army had no problems. Rose did have problems. You didn't fall or hurt yourself, but you...
I did.
Well...
I did fall. I hurt my arm. There we were. We got all these, what I call my uniform. I don't know, whatever.
Protective clothing.
Well, all kinds of stuff. I still look back. I remember doing it. I remember thinking how strange it is. We've actually got pictures of ourselves like that. Why did you do that? That was strange.
And then we, Rose had an extra bicycle where she lived, and of course, stupid me, I'm expert bicyclist, of course, and the faster I go downhill, the faster the better it is. So at the bottom of the hill was the snowplow had taken gravel and made a bump. I figured, wow, I'm going to go down the hill and make a beautiful dump. And Rose is going to watch me, of course. I came down the hill and I went on my head and my shoulder.
He was showing off and he deserved to fall.
Thank you.
But can you imagine a person of his age on a bicycle doing tricks?
So anyway,
he was trying to impress you.
The good part of all this is that Rose jumped off her bike and she came over and she embraced me.
I don't remember that.
But she also told me that I was an idiot.
I don't think I came over and embraced you. I think I had other words.
He just tries to remember the good things.
And so on this world famous trip to Sweden, which happened the same summer, I innocently asked Rose, would you like to make a bicycle trip? And she said, of course, thinking about our day trips around Kettleby, that, yeah, it would be nice. 3 or 4 hours on the bike would be nice. So I arranged for a 7-day bike trip. And it was along the south coast of Sweden towards the Baltic. And I had a military map, which was dated 1957. So the map is 40 years out of date. So we go bicycling now. The road distance was 120 kilometers on the highway. It was about 270 kilometers along the coastline, because coastline goes like this. And along the way, we met an angry bull. We were attacked by wasps, and you got stung several times.
It rained.
It rained. But we had an agreement that the men's bathroom was on the left side and the women's on the right side, and that worked beautifully. And I had, of course, made sure that I knew the area, that there were restaurants, so that we could have lunch every day. We stayed at a hotel. Actually, we stayed with my friends as well. And my friends in Sweden, like Rose, does not do much. So she had the joy of experiencing 3 or 4 very drunken men reliving old memories.
Actually, now that he starts to mention it, I had said before that we went to Sweden, but what he had offered me was, let's go to Sweden, and we are going to go on a bike road trip, which was great, because that's one thing I hadn't done. I had done a lot of other hiking, but I had never done a bicycle trip. So that was the real purpose of us going to Sweden, to go on this road trip. And I mean, it was, I'm going to finish off his story. He told you about the old map, and in his mind, there were all kinds of little cafes. I mean, and this is what he said, oh, Rose, we're going to ride, we'll go on our bicycles. It's right beautiful. We're going to go along the water. And they've got all these little cafes and we can stop and have coffee. And, it was going to be so wonderful. There was nothing. 40 years later, there's nothing. There's no cafes. There's a main highway. Everything is closed. And the truth is that there was nowhere to even stop to get lunch. So we actually took to stealing boiled eggs from the breakfast that we would have in the little hotels and taking it with us so that we would have a boiled egg as we were driving along on the road. And yes, we've got lots of memories from that.
How would you summarize your trip to Sweden?
It was amazing. I mean, really, it was amazing. And he is right. I wasn't very happy about the bull, and I wasn't very happy that we ended up going through a farmer's field because the map was wrong. And I mean, I wasn't happy that there were more places to stop and eat, but it was an awful lot of fun. And it was fun meeting his friends and seeing things that were different because I had never been there before. No, it was a great trip.
Yeah, clearly, because there was a lot of adventure.
There was a lot of adventure, let me tell you.
And you love adventures.
I do. I love adventure.
Exactly. And he loves romance. And he loves you. So I think the trip really worked out well.
It was very fun. Anyways, we made it through the trip.
And then what happened? So when did you guys start living together then?
Well, it wasn't until after that. It wasn't until a year after that.
And what made you decide that you should live together?
Well, that's a good question. What made us decide? Well,
I'll tell you. We were in Vienna, and we had a good time together. We enjoyed the city. We bicycled in Vienna. We ate all the food that you have in Österreich. And the devil struck me. So when Rose was in a soft mood, I said, Rose, why don't I move in with you? And she nodded and said yes. And without further ado, within the next hour, I was in an internet cafe and posted my apartment for rent.
Wow.
We were at the opera. And he goes, somehow he actually had posted that his apartment was for sublet. Now, never in my life did I expect that this was going to happen like instantly. I figured we'll go home, in a couple of months, he'll move in. We're at the opera and he gets a call back from someone who wants to rent the apartment like from the Sunday that we get back. We arrive on the Friday or the Saturday and they want to take over on the Sunday. And he says, sure. And I'm looking at him, what? You rented your apartment? You were going to go home, you got to take all that stuff and take it, furnished, obviously, but all of your stuff, you've got to come and take it over to my place. I wasn't ready for him to move in.
But you had said,
mentally.
You had said yes.
No, listen, mentally, I said yes, thinking that you would be moving in a few months later. I wasn't mentally ready for him to move in instantly like that.
I'm a man of action.
He's a man of action. But so that's what happened. And I think he's got it backwards. I think the truth is, when we were over in Vienna, it was very nice being together. He lived in downtown Toronto. I lived in, where did I live?
Kettlery.
No, I wasn't at Kettlery in that time, was I?
Oh, no, you lived in Thornhill.
But he had already proven that he was a great help. When I ended up moving from where I was in the country to a townhouse in the city, and he did all kinds of wonderful things for me. So that was that story. But I'm going to go one further because you asked a question, and I want to tell you my answer to this one because I think everybody will find this is funny. I want to read the question, and the question was, early impressions and memories. When did your story truly begin to unfold? What were those early memories or small gestures that became the foundation of your bond? Need, N-E-E-D, okay? I was living on a property that was 10 and a half acres. I had a groundskeeper that would come and look after the lawn and look after my dogs and stuff. And she died in the winter, and I met him in April. And this was like the first season I was kind of on my own on the property. And so the first thing that happened was that I think I ran over the cord. Was it an electric lawnmower that I had, or what? Was it electric or gas?
Gas.
It was gas, whatever. Anyways, as soon as I started to go out and do the lawn myself, 10.5 acres, please, and I broke the cord, or I broke something, and we had been out, and I said to him, like, I got a problem with my lawnmower. He came and fixed it. Okay, that's number one. He came.
He had a huge commercial lawnmower with a gasoline engine, and it had a gear and a shifter gear. So the shifter cable broke, and now it was immobile.
Yeah, you can't move it.
So it's a 15-cent piece of wire. Of course, it's deep inside the machinery.
He worked hard. Okay. Secondly,
He had to impress you.
that's then he also would come over and mow my lawn. Like
Now it worked.
Well, now we're dating, because to mow all the land that I had is more than an afternoon. It takes more than that. And while he was there, he and my dog, a German Shepherd, were good buddies. Okay, that meant a lot to me. He was so good to my dog, and I want to tell you that my dog never, ever begged at a table until Bengt came around. Now, Bengt tells me he never fed the dog, and I don't understand why the dog was sitting under his feet begging. But that was okay. But the big turning point was that I had a swimming pool, and there was a lady that would come to clean, and she phoned me up at work, and she was screaming, "There's snakes! There's snakes! They're on the wall, they're on the floor, they're all over the place, and I'm never coming back here, and I'm leaving right now." And she hung up. Well, my dog's home alone. It's the middle of the day, or maybe even the morning. I can't remember when she had phoned up like this. I have no idea if there's really snakes, or, is she lying or what? So I go driving home, and I go into the pump room, and there are snakes. There's snakes as wide as my arm, and there's snakes that are tiny like my finger. And there's many of them. And I'm looking at them, and I think, I'll phone Bengt. and he says, "I'll be right over." He's 120 kilometers away, and he says, "I'll be right over." And sure enough, a couple of hours later, he arrives, and he says, on the phone, he said, "It's okay, I'll fix it all up." And I'm sure he didn't think that there were as many snakes as they were. So he comes into the pump room, and he takes a look, and he says, "Oh, well, there's no problem at all." And I don't know whether they're poisonous or grass snakes or what they are. And he looks like, "Oh, no, they're not poisonous." And then he says, "I'll show you." He knows everything, remember? He says, so he picks up this snake, this thick, and he pulls it up, and he says, "You see," and it comes, what is the story, Bengt? If they bite...
If they bite, they are not poisonous.
Not poisonous.
A poisonous snake is made such it cannot bite itself, whereas a garden snake can bite itself. They're more flexible. So I picked it up by the tail, and it was a big one, like this. And it comes up, and it wiggles, and it bit into my hand. Well, I actually had a piece of
So he's
cloth.
standing there and says, "See, it's not
So
it's
it
not
bit into my
poisonous.
hand, and I
It's
had
not
this loop
poisonous."
hanging. I said, "It's not dangerous."
So he's got a bag. He came prepared, he came with a bag, and he takes the one and puts it into the bag, and then he grabs another and he puts it in, and he takes all the big ones. He took all the big snakes out and put them in a bag, and then he walks all the way to the forest, and he puts all the snakes into the forest. No, nothing is to be killed or anything to be damaged or harmed. And then he comes back and he says, "Here, this is where they're coming in. I'll go to the hardware store and I'll get this and I'll do this and that." And he did. He went out, he came back, and he ended up, what did you do? You
I sealed all the walls.
Okay. Sounds good to me. I get up in the morning and I go down to look, and there's snakes, little ones. No big fat ones, but a lot of little ones. So I pick up the phone. I say, "Bengt, there's still snakes." He says, "I'll be over." He says, I'll redo it.
But this time they were in the pool, so I just took the pool cleaner, and scooped them up, put them in a bag, and carried them
Anyways,
out.
he had to reseal it. He did a great work. You know what? Am I going to throw him away?
Of course not.
He was so good. He did so many wonderful things, and you know, he helped in ways that I can't even tell you. That's before I had moved, and then after that, the packing up and the cleaning up, he was like a secret weapon, and it was amazing. He was wonderful.
Do you have a picture of the snakes?
No,
I've lived in the country, so I'm familiar with snakes.
I'm sure, because you've traveled extensively. You were in the army.
Well, I grew up in my father had a cottage in the country, and there were lots and lots of snakes. So you learn to respect them, and which ones not to respect.
you know. I'll tell you, there was another incident when we talk about things like this. When you talk about what makes someone special, my dog, I had lived alone with 2 dogs, and in the winter my older dog had died, and in the summer when I was dating Bengt, he became quite close, as I told you, with her name was Betsy, and
A big German shepherd.
and Betsy suddenly stopped eating, and I had taken her to the vet. You know, and they kind of looked at it. Anyways, to make a long story short, the dog had to be put down suddenly, and I phoned him and I told him that Betsy had put down. You know what? He started to cry on the phone, and he said, do you want me to come and be with you? And that's very special.
Yeah, that
Very
is.
special that somebody cares enough and knows how you feel about your dog. My dogs were like my children. I lived with them for 7 years alone in the country. So those were all the reasons why I said yes when he asked me to marry him.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
So the question is, what were the early memories of small gestures? And this goes back to the same the same house in the same summer. So I helped Rose to snip the trees because the trees were coming down. And enthusiastic as I am, and a little bit happy, so I go snip, snip. Oops, that was a wasp's nest. And not only did I cut the wasp net, I cut it in the middle. Now, there aren't that many wasps inside a nest during the day, but there are about. So my head was inside the tree, by the way, so I was doing it. So within a few seconds, I probably had a dozen stings here, there. In my upper body, I had a shirt on, so everything that was exposed was stung. And Rose, I'm not allergic to bee stings, so to me, it hurt like hell. But Rose didn't know that. She thought I was going to die right in front of her. So she did all the things that a good nurse is supposed to do. And I just sit there and I say, well, it's fine. It's going away. I'm getting better. Give me 5 minutes. And she was all over me as a nurse. She got the wet compressors, and she was looking for antihistamine.
Yeah.
Didn't find any, but didn't need any either. But she had it in. And I said, no, it's fine. Just give me a few minutes. And, I'm hurting like hell. Give me a few minutes. And I was over. Well, I was all quickly, of course. But the feeling that this happened to me, and now when something happens to you, you're all inside yourself. The pain is all mine. But she was the one who embraced me and my pain. Compassion and action. A woman of action. End of story.
Wow. And how long had you been dating by that time?
Oh, this was all in the summer.
Oh,
We met in April,
a few months.
and
couple of months.
by the time when we went to Sweden, it was October
Yeah.
of that year. So, like, these are all things that happen in the house.
And this is usually people, younger people, That's the kind of love that it tells me that age doesn't define love, because the two of y'all, even after being married and then again going back to dating, it literally felt like two young people getting together, and the way they would behave for each, like do things for each other. But now you were more matured, you were both more you had families, both of y'all had kids, and then doing that for somebody else, because it clearly shows how selflessly you were living for each other.
True. And this is all about the first year. Yeah. Shall we talk about the second, the third, and the fourth?
No.
But so over the years, we've had these happy moments and caring moments for both of us. But going on to your next question, challenging along
Yes,
the way.
there are lots of challenges that come your way, right?
The funny story about part of that is we did have an early challenge, and it was that anything that was involving anything physical, those had to be the best. And at this time, she had a full gym set up at home. She was up at 4:30 in the morning, go thump, 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 running. And of course, I don't do that. And I figured I'm better than her. Of course, I can walk better. I can bicycle better. Hell no. So we go out walking, and it was faster and faster and faster. And finally, it dawns on me. One of us is going to fall down from exhaustion. And it ain't going to be me. So I stopped. I said, Rose, stop now. Stop, sit down. There's a bench, sit down. And she looked at me like I was crazy. And she sat down. I said, Rose, look me into the eyes. We have to make a joint decision right now. And that is, what was it?
We never compete. We never compete with each other. And actually, this was very early on in our dating. This probably would have been within the first month of our dating when he turned around and he said that. He said, you're very competitive and I'm very competitive. We must make a vow right now that we never compete with each other. And we don't. We never, ever compete.
No.
Which is so beautiful, because in today's day and age, everyone is, even if they're partners, there's so much competition, right? Everyone's like, I'm earning more money than you are. People forget that you're a team. And it's a partnership. It's not
good definition.
About fighting for the best. You don't have to be the best. Yes. You have to be the best couple together.
It's what you do with each other. Yeah. Nobody is the best. It's making sure. In fact, what he taught me is that we need to help each other to be the best that we can be. Not that we have to show that we're the best. Yeah. But that he to make me the best I can be and be supportive, and I to make him the best that he can be by being supportive too. So that's kind of how we have lived. And I think that that's been a very happy thing for us, that we can be happy for each other doing something well that they like to do. There's no competition, there's no jealousy, there's nothing, just to be able to share the wonderful feelings for each other of how we live life.
That's why they call it pure love.
It is.
And when I see the two of y'all, that is exactly the definition. But tell me one thing. So you are Jew and you're a Catholic.
No, I was born a Protestant. Big difference. Okay. I was confirmed when I was 14 years old. Okay. And I have never been to church since then.
Okay.
Actually, I was married in church, and my children were actually blessed in church, or Christian. But that's about as religious as it gets for me. Okay. And Rose is deeply religious. I have to fight her every Saturday morning.
No, but be careful, Bengt, because when I was younger, I was far more religious than we are today. But I mean, that faded as we age. I think that your perspective changes.
Yes.
And my perspective on religion certainly had changed by the time that I had met him. But it was never really a problem.
No.
So then what were the problems? Like, because every relationship has these ups and downs, right? Were there any in yours? I'm sure.
Well, I'll tell you, our kids weren't all that easy. And it took them time to accept. And as I had said when we were talking about getting engaged, I think being engaged and being married was a big difference for them, because it's a matter that they had to accept it. And I don't think we share each other's holidays, although the first year, and this is kind of interesting, the first year that we were together for Christmas, and he was at my home, and I had said to him, Bengt, you should go home. You should go back to your place, because when you wake up tomorrow morning, there's nothing. There's no Christmas tree, there's no Christmas stockings, there's no Christmas music, there's no gifts, there's no nothing. And he said, no. He said, I'm going to stay here. And of course, you get up in the morning and there's no music, no tree, no nothing. And, he said...
Next Christmas was much different. I was in charge.
No, you weren't.
No, my daughter was.
No, it wasn't anywhere near that. When we were together, and I should say the following Christmas, I got him this spindly little tree that it had no leaves on it. I put, little decorations on it. And I said to him when I took him over to him, and I said, here, this is really nice. It's so, it's small and you can have it. And I said, and when you finish with the Christmas decorations, we can put Easter eggs and Valentine's and everything, and it can be an all-purpose tree. And then I go back for Valentine's Day or Easter, and I said, Bengt, get the tree, and we'll put it out. He said, I threw it out.
It didn't qualify even in my limited expectation as a Christmas tree. It wasn't coniferous, by the way. So,
anyways, that would be the only things. We really never had a problem with our religion. He has immersed himself in our tradition, and I have immersed myself in his. And I think it's wonderful the way Christmas is celebrated by him. And I think he enjoys the family traditions of the meals that we have and the things that we do to celebrate our religious holidays. So that hasn't been. You've got a question here that I had written down. Challenges along the way.
Yes.
And I think the challenge was when after he had an operation, he had sepsis, and he almost died. And that's hard. It's hard. We had only been going together, and we were married.
We'd been married for 3 years.
We were married 3 years. And
I had something which was very straightforward. I had a prostate operation, and a day later you're supposed to be home. But I got sepsis, which is general blood poisoning, and I was actually home when it happened, and I ended up going in an ambulance very fast back to the hospital. And then the last I remember saying to Rose was goodbye.
No, that was...
And I had no idea what was going on, because I was getting out of it. And then, of course, I didn't wake up until the next day. And Rose sat by I don't think it's an operating table, but something.
The emergency ward.
The ER. She sat in the ER. And that's it was obviously very much upsetting for me. But what happened then was that Rose changed her entire life to accommodate me, because I came home a bit of a weak man. And everything, the schedules, daily routines, what we do, everything was tuned to what I was strong enough to do. And unfortunately, we've had 2 more events like that, but it was heart events.
3 more.
So I've had 3 heart attacks, and each time there's months of recovery. And there's been no hesitation from Rose to change the whole life to accommodate me. And that, I think, is just fantastic.
Yeah, and I know I have known you guys for a little longer now. And the last event that happened last year, sometime around June or July.
It was, yes, it was.
Yeah. And I remember I met Rose in the hallway downstairs, and she was so strong. I think the woman that she's like, no, he's going to be fine. I know he's going to be fine. Every time I met her, she was like, I know he's going to be fine. Of course I know. And then we meet you a little later, I think during the barbecue party.
Yeah.
And there you are. I remember you were wearing your red pants and you were happy. And I was like, how, like, it's her love for you and the way she takes care of you. And it's also because you are not someone who feels old. Because you're like, I am going to be 18 for the rest of my life. I'm not going to let age define me or things that happen to me define me.
That's a very good summary, and I'm very happy to be able to feel happy. I can tell myself to be happy. It's shitty as hell, but I don't know what you call it. You from India have a lot to do with looking inside yourself and yoga or yoga-like activities. I never had any of that, but I still say life is good. And life with Rose is fantastic.
Thank you, darling.
And she's had her bit of shit too, and it's...
You've got to work through it, and but those were the things that were hard. And even this last time, with this last heart attack, has been very difficult because he came out with a bit of a different attitude than what he had had in the past. Until he decided that he was going to be smart enough to listen to me.
Yeah, the wife is always right.
Well, you see, Superman has a hard time taking advice.
Yeah,
So she had to affect the Superman.
he met his kryptonite.
I guess I met my kryptonite at that time.
Yeah, but it's so difficult, right? Sometimes because he's going through something physically and you are going through something emotionally.
That's right.
And when you are a team, both of you all are suffering, but you can't discuss that because you're like, I don't want to put that pressure on him because he's suffering. I don't want to put that pressure on her.
That's true.
And dealing with that, how did you deal with that? Like, I know communication is important, but you're also dealing with your own self throughout this journey, right?
Khyati, it's not easy. This last time was more difficult than any of the others because he decided he had been Superman before, but now he was Superman when he came out. And he was actually in denial of what would happen. He wouldn't admit that he had a heart attack. And that was very difficult. And there were other complications that came along with it. So it just became very difficult. How do you handle it? You yell, which is terrible. When you have to get to a point where you're angry, you're so angry that you need to yell at him, you're going to kill yourself. If you don't stop it, it's not a matter of, it will go away. It's a matter, if you continue doing what you're doing, you won't be here. And no, I told him flat out, if you don't smarten up, you're going to leave me alone. And the deal that we have, he's supposed to be looking after me too. That's the deal.
Okay, so she laid guilt. And that worked. I slowed down.
Yeah, because that's important. And wait, before we go into anything, I want to know, how did the two of y'all get married?
How?
Yeah, I know that's a story.
Oh,
I want to know about that.
That was very difficult.
Yes.
Of course, we're going to get married by a clergyman. Remember, the God business? So I said, let's find a clergyman. But there is a little issue, because if we go to a church, none of Rose's relatives would come. Not a single one, because
let's not say relatives, try daughters.
Okay, well, so let's say they're all Jews. And Jews customarily don't go to a church. They can go to look at the beautiful artwork, but they don't go for anything.
I think you're wrong the way you're saying it. Sorry to interrupt you, but the fact is, it's not that they wouldn't have come. I would never do it because I would be offending them.
Okay.
That was the matter.
All right. So now it
was not a consideration.
So now it got very complicated because obviously, hey, the rabbi is fine with me. But there wasn't so fine with the rabbis. So tell that story.
Well, Bengt insisted that he have a clergyman say and marry us in the eyes of God. And if you go
I'm not
to
religious.
City Hall, or any of the people that marry mixed marriages, they say, in the powers installed or given to me, I pronounce you man and wife. And that wasn't what Bengt wanted. He wanted to make sure that we were married in the eyes of God, which was difficult. And we had been trying to find someone who would marry us. We were trying to find a location. The other thing, he wanted all the daughters. There's five daughters between the two of us.
3 of hers, 2 of mine.
Yeah, and he wanted all 5 daughters to be able to attend, and that was hard. One is in Sweden, one is in Connecticut, one is in Vancouver, one is in Ottawa, and the other one is in Toronto. 5 different locations. So to try to make this happen was indeed difficult. And then my youngest daughter had a daughter, and the baby was going to be named in California as being Jewish. This is a baby naming service, and the baby being blessed and giving a Hebrew name and stuff. And she had already arranged a date, and she had arranged for a relative in Hollywood, California, to use her home, and had already arranged for a rabbi who was a conservative rabbi. And so like 10 days before we were going, I said to Bengt, I don't know why we just don't try to get the same rabbi. And we did. We called him up, and he was very nice. He understood. And he said, well, first of all, I don't usually marry couples, without interviewing them, without talking with them. I don't want to just marry you and not be sure that this is a lifetime thing for you. So he said, this is what you do. Don't talk to each other. Send me a letter telling me why you want to marry each other. And depending on what your answer is, then I will decide whether I will marry you or not. And he did, and we did, and then he phoned us back and he said, I think the two of you are perfect for each other. I love the way what you say about each other, and yes, I will marry you. Like, we got 10 days now to organize. So we then had actually my daughter organized with the relatives' home, and we had 25 people of 13 of only that Bengt and I knew, but it was beautiful, and we did get the daughters to come. 4 of the 5 daughters were able to come to attend our wedding. And the rabbi was absolutely wonderful. The first thing he did was to name the baby. And then he took the baby after naming it and put the baby in his arms. And he said, and your grandmother has a special gift for you, a grandfather. And then he went into the wedding ceremony, and Bengt was very insistent that, it had to be a regular wedding. It wasn't, just a few words. So we had the chuppah, we had all the prayers, and then Bengt even stood and jumped on the glass, which is very typical. And then we were married, and we sat with our 25 people. It was lovely. It was a lovely day.
With the Hollywood sign in the background, because we were so close to the hillside where that sign is.
And it was very special.
What day did you get married?
March the 18th.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You know what? Both of us can't seem to remember the date.
Listen, I know the date. I was going to wait. I was just waiting for those. Oh, was it?